I'm Jack.
I'm John.
I'm Elliot.
I'm Lennon.
And we're Tin Meats, and we're here today to do a track breakdown of our album, KILTER. The first track on our album, KILTER, is Square One, which also happened to be the first song we wrote for the album, I believe.
Yes, I brought the chorus first, just a little light piano ditty. And Jack said,
let's ruin it.
Let's ruin it. Let's take it somewhere completely different.
And then once we'd stitched those two sections together, Lennon wrote some lyrics to it.
I did. John had sent me maybe 10 or 20 short stories that he'd written, and I was determined to pull something from these short stories, just transform them into something new. And I kind of took inspiration from actually being in John's flat whilst he was struggling is the word, with a cryptic crossword. So it kind of took that form.
And then because the lyrics are about black and white squares and crosswords, it's the first song on the album, it's the first song we wrote, just calling it Square One seemed to be the most logical thing to do.
Track number 2 on KILTER is Shrink, which is unusual in that I made up the guitar part, and Jack and I have very different guitar styles. Mine's quite finger-picky, and Jack's is more scrunky, perhaps you would say.
Yeah, it's a bit more ham-fisted. John's got some, delicate finger-picking in him. And John's a great guitarist, so I don't know why we don't, get John to play guitar more often. Maybe it's because the rest of us are no good on keyboards. But, yeah, it's unusual in the sense that it comes out of a John guitar part.
Yeah, it came out that Lennon and I met for a day in the studio, and this is what we ended up at the end of that day.
The lyrics came from an idea of psychedelic changes in scale. I wrote an entire song based on Alice in Wonderland, not quite like White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane, but certainly things growing and shrinking, hence the title. But no one really liked that song I presented, so we repurposed the lyrics for what became Shrink.
Process, congeal, all sense, conceal. I reach for my family. They shrink into the carpet.
Track 3 on KILTER is Courier, which I mostly wrote by myself. The initial idea was John had said to me that if you reduce a time signature, so if you're playing in 7, then 6, then 5, then 4, then it sounds like it's speeding up even if you're at the same tempo. The demo we did was called Fake 12 because it's kind of like a 7 plus a 5. So then the next section's a 5 and then the chorus is a 4 and it's all at the same tempo, but it feels like it's getting quicker and quicker.
Then I wrote the lyrics about the dancing plague of 1518 with sort of a satirical approach.
But it became kind of a guiding light for the whole album to me, because that last section is essentially saying you'll have to join us or stop us. So flail with us till you can stand no more. It feels like a call to arms, come with Tin Meats, join our weird world.
I remember the first time I ever heard Courier, was the first time I ever recorded with Tin Meats. I remember dancing around in the control booth, listening to the section in 5 time, and having to stop dead completely because I couldn't believe what I was hearing as the chorus section. It was incredibly powerful, incredibly fast. Only then to learn it much later and always be amazed that I managed to play it in time, to be honest.
Grounded is track number 4. perhaps my favourite recording experience of this song was this tiny bell sound right before the bridge kicks in. Was actually the tapping of a tape machine. Can't remember what we tapped it with.
I think we just tapped the reel of a spool of tape with a pencil,
Yes.
I believe.
And it sounds brilliant leading into that chaotic section.
Writing it as well, there was like this, in that middle bridge section, we sort of wrote it note by note. Like one of us would play 4 notes and then someone else would be like, oh no, I know how that little line ends. Don't think we've ever done that before. To be honest, I don't think it would bear fruit most of the time. I imagine if you did that game where you draw a head and fold the paper over. I think that game's called Consequences.
Yes.
I imagine if you tried to write a song like that, it would just come out with utter nonsense most of the time. But in that moment, we were all perfectly in sync.
Yeah, we're always aiming to be as collaborative as possible. But yes, there we collaborated on one riff altogether.
I then wrote the lyrics about Franz Reichelt, who threw himself off of the Eiffel Tower back in the 1900s with a man-made parachute suit, which happened to fail. And yeah, the song kind of took this form of being about a breakthrough, but then becoming grounded, and so on.
But the funny thing about that is the same as like the previous song. It became to mean something else. I've interpreted it differently. So it became like the loss of love of the creative process as well, where it's kind of like I'm falling out of love with breaking through. Became like frustration with trying to get things working. There's a few times along the way when making this record that we lost focus or lost direction. And Grounded came to be about that to me, even though it's literally about falling to your death.
Let the scarfing on their faces disappear. There's a formless fabric trailing behind as the circling crowd slowly subsides.
The 5th track on the album is called Mir, and I wrote this in my cupboard. My flat at the time was in the attic of an old building, and I'd made like a little synth studio in the cupboard. And well, that's where it came from, really. And I was always, I had it for a while before I brought it to Tin Meats.
And even when you did bring it to us, it sat around for a while
I was
before
say
we did
had it
anything
for a while
with
because it's not like the other stuff. We don't do gentle very often.
Yeah.
I'm glad we eventually ended up accepting it as a gentle ballad, and it stayed that way, because it did almost feel like we were afraid to just have a soft song on the record amongst the bangers.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in the recording of it as well, when we did finally get it together, we did a like slowed down drums thing. So we recorded the drums at a quicker speed so that we could then slow it down. So it's kind of got this like slushy, spacey kind of grittiness to it, which I think really adds to that vibe. I think from like a producer kind of mind, I think I needed to find a way that was going to be not just it's soft and gentle, that it's got some like weird crunchiness to it. This is also the first part Elliot wrote for Tin Meats.
Yeah, this is the first ever artistic input I had into Tin Meats. Yeah, after I can't take much credit for it because I got the chords from Jack, and then
you got the chords from John.
Well, I got the chords from John.
Jack
Yes,
got the chords from me.
And it's almost all kind of based around that. It's very simple.
But I think those lines kind of like flow through the song.
Yes, it's
like that bass line is the driving force of it in the recording.
That's it. I do love as well. It's a very simple bass line, but it's very, very like you say, sweet and softly until it gets to the kind of the big massive crescendo.
And then Elliot's playing chords on the bass.
Yeah.
Rocking.
We keep an eye on you through your 9 to 5, but even satellites blink from time to time.
Track 6 on Kilter is So Below, which again came out from that interim period when we didn't have a bassist. So on the initial demo, I'm playing bass, and I think it came pretty quickly. It may have even been the same day that we wrote Square One.
I believe it to be. I remember there was a period of time where we really, really struggled with actually changing sections in this song, as they're all just quite wildly different, and changing tempo and time signature.
Well, yes, to be honest, I remember us wondering between ourselves whether it was just nonsense. And it took a few weeks to settle in and to get used to it.
Which ultimately led me down the path of writing these lyrics. They're a bit esoteric in nature. It's about like the psychedelic nature of total darkness. I was reading about the Oracle at Delphi and some esoteric books, and the idea of finding creative and spiritual direction in the unknown became like a really strong topic to me. Like the idea of intentionally hallucinating in total dark to gain some sort of insight. So the sort of unknowable structure of the song is reflected in the lyrics about the unknown. Track 7 is Peace of Mind, which John has just told me he remembers writing like a kind of gentle demo to this 4 years ago, but I remember us jamming on this around the time of TMEP.
Well, no, I do have a demo of me on the piano buried in the dusty recesses of my phone's voice memos, and I'd imagined it very slow, very soft, more like Mir.
And then you handed it to me and I completely bastardized it.
Yeah, you just ruined the whole thing. But that's what I love. I bring something like that. I have quite a specific idea in my head, and then it ends up being absolutely nothing like what I expected, but always better.
I remember having a very tricky situation while recording this song. To do with a rubber chicken.
Yeah, you were furious.
I was furious at the rubber chicken, which the other guys had insisted it goes on the front of the song.
And does it make it to the front of the song?
It made it to the front of the song.
And were we right to put it at the front of the song?
We were so right, and I'm so glad it made it there. I love the rubber chicken now.
I can no longer imagine the song without a rubber chicken.
Lennon wrote the lyrics about Phineas Gage, who had an iron rod blasted through his head and he lost a part of his brain. Again, taking weird angles from like topics other people are bringing. That end section, I wrote entirely about him longing for the pole. And that became like the kind of like, that as a finale to the song is just like really funny to me. Like not mourning the loss of the piece of his brain, but mourning the loss of the pole.
Come to the Long Mountain and dig up my bones. Hold my skull in your hands. Trace your finger over the holes. My constant companion lived with me at home. It should have stayed with me. I'm glad it's back with my dome.
Track number 8, Caught in the Wild, was spawned from me wanting to play all of the wildest ideas on one song. I wrote it mostly myself, the instrumental, and I'm so glad I did.
Funnily enough, I remember you playing as this riff when we were making like TMEP or something, and we couldn't find any way of making it work into a song. So like almost as a kind of like challenge to us, you just went away and made it into a song, which became like a lead single off the album. So it's like, I'm glad you continued pursuing that idea.
Absolutely. I remember both of us actually, a little while after the music was finished, both of us going shopping, and a very stressful situation arose.
Well, yeah, lyrically it's pretty silly, but it was about me losing patience in the supermarket. I had a voucher or something and it wouldn't scan unless I was connected to the internet, but the Wi-Fi in the supermarket wasn't working. I didn't have to have enough money to cover the shop without the voucher, and it seemed like everything was just working against me.
Color from a silver spoon. Charlie Dash, 20 cans of mine. Pack it up, familiar cartoons. We're caught in the wild. We're caught in the wild. Bury me in the chest freezer, where I can rest easier.
I went home and put a load of supermarket imagery together as a sort of diatribe against supermarkets. It's maybe our least serious song lyrically, but it has some really good lines in it, like separated mechanically like mother and child, and I weigh myself as loose fruit and veg, ripe and ready with a vacant smile. I think they're all like, you know, it's that thing of like taking kind of like somewhat like standard imagery, but then putting like spins on it. It's a fun song to play. It was a fun song to write. And it's rare that we talk about the music we're doing as, that's fun.
I think people are charmed by the silliness of it. In a way.
And we made a very silly supermarket-based video, which, after you've heard this, you should go and check out immediately.
Dragging along a 10-lane motorway, stockaded by the concrete palisades, disconnected from the ground and each other, all enclosed in a separate bubble.
Track 9 is Waiting Room, which I made up the music for. And, well, it sounds like there's some, quite carefully thought out music theory behind it in the way the chords relate to each other. There isn't. I write sort of just, whatever sounds good I go along with. And I'm always looking for the right kind of wrong, a nice
that
sort
kind
of oddness.
Kind of sums up the whole band.
Yeah.
The right kind of wrong.
Right. And so, I can't explain what I'm looking for except that I know I found it when I hear it.
You know it's right when it's just wrong enough.
Yeah, exactly that.
To build on that, I teach drums, and in one particular school, I sat on their drum kit, which was some kind of battered thing, half of the drum kit's falling and loose and broken, and I played a drum part that I thought might fit with this song, recorded it, and we actually ended up using that as a drum loop in the verses of this song. So you can hear that primary school battered drum kit sound throughout the verses.
Float along in a dreamlike state, overstimulated but barely living, frantic action and underachieving. Sit and wait in the waiting room.
I really love the lyrics to Waiting Room.
It's like, it came out of there's so much discussion right now about liminal spaces or non-places, and the idea that the places you pass through aren't real places, that sort of thing. And it's sort of this depressing idea. But the idea that you spend a lot of time there, when you're forced into these places, is often where you have some great creative ideas, because everything's been taken away from you. In a doctor's waiting room, there's nothing else to do but wait, and then your mind can wander into places that it may not necessarily otherwise wander into.
I also love that we kind of, as a joke, when we were first writing this, joked that the chorus would
just be sit and wait in the waiting room. Wait and sit in the sitting room.
And it kind of half ended up like that.
Yeah.
I'm glad it did. We've got a catchy hook on our hands.
Sometimes the first idea is the best idea, even if it's hard to justify. Track 10 on Kilter is More Weight. I wrote this song on acoustic guitar, sat on my stairs. I was playing around with some sort of sense of counterpoint, one note's going up as one note's going down. That was kind of the rough idea of the guitar part. But the lyrics are loosely based around the story of Giles Corey in the Salem witch trials, where he's crushed to death because he refuses to enter a plea, and while he's being crushed just says more weight as they pile more rocks on as an act of defiance. But it's more about when you're at your lowest ebb, you find these self-styled self-help gurus who are just grifters and charlatans, and they always say things like diamonds form under pressure to mean whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger type thing. So using a real-world example of Giles Corey being crushed to death by pressure to show that sometimes hardship is just crushing. It's not necessarily a rite of passage. Suffering isn't a badge of honour. It's okay to feel crushed by something upsetting.
I've been told diamonds form under immense pressure, as if the weight upon my chest could be some sort of ambition. Advice doesn't mean much under here in the dirt and splinters. My last breath leaks out in a whisper.
Speaking of crushing, when we were when we were recording this song, we hadn't actually really planned where it was to go. So Jack brought in this bare bones kind of skeleton of a song, and it got to this bridge part, and me and John had absolutely no idea what was going on, and it was almost a moment in time where we all froze and we were like, well, what are we doing?
It was a rare moment where I played the whole song to John and Lennon, and they just went, I don't get it. At least that bridge section. It was just like, I don't understand what this is meant to be.
Yeah, the melody just didn't make sense. It may as well have been random notes at first, but you know, it bedded in.
Yeah. And then by the end of that session, we were like, we turned all the lights off, we listened to it in the dark, and we were like, oh, we've actually created something really good here.
Yes.
It was utter glee.
And
well, like the most miserable glee you can experience.
it is a miserable song, yes. But adding more instruments to it became a very delicate process.
Yes.
Because it was guitar and vocals, and we wanted to add something, but it was almost like if you added the wrong note or a little bit too much, you'd just destroy the magic.
Yeah, trying to put a bass on it was like a really painstaking thing, because it was like, if you put on one too many notes, then suddenly it's kind of grooving, and you really don't need it to have any
And the
groove.
same with the drums as well. I think it's just boom,
sticks and clicks. Sticks and clicks.
And we wrestled so much with, you know, whether to add one more drum beat.
And then that kind of crazy noise that you've ended it on. It's like almost just random, like glitchy white noise that the whole song ends on.
Yeah, but again, that's just one note.
Yeah.
Just held.
It's another soft song on the album as well, similar to Mir.
Mir.
Yeah.
But I think it's got a different energy to it.
Absolutely. This is the most sad song we've ever done. Yeah. Track 11 is Off Kilter, and it's kind of like a combination of three completely different riffs. That verse riff is just kind of a dumb riff I came up with. That middle section, the shuffly section, is an idea, again, we came up with years ago, of this kind of like overlapping out of phase parts where
the hope is that it's like that optical illusion where you're always walking up the stairs without getting any
the
higher.
Escher painting.
Yes, the Escher painting.
So it's like everyone's going rising and rising and rising, but overlapping, so at no point does anybody conclude anywhere. And then the chorus, honestly, is something I've had since I was about 16. Yeah. You added a couple of little changes at the end, but that actual, we're trying to write a Beatles song at 16. It's a bit like Because or like She's So Heavy or something. But obviously we're not playing it like that at all.
I'm not here for the cure, just here to make me better. They want me feel insecure. Have a heart of pure paranoia.
In the middle section when we recorded it, that like phasing section we were just talking about, we're all stomping and clapping on it, and there's this rising filtered delay that Lennon wanted to put in it, and there's some sound design I recorded just on my phone a really busy cafe I was in Nottingham, and then put that through loads of effects. There's a lot of weird sounds going on in there, which kind of pushed that section through it. Lyrically, it's based around James Tilly Matthews, who has retrospectively been referred to as the first documented case of paranoid schizophrenia. But what was interesting about that story to me is that he actually proposed some reforms to mental health units while he was committed. And some of the things he thought he was being controlled or attacked by sound quite similar to modern technology. So there's lots of kind of like references to like almost like electronic mind control devices, which didn't exist, but they now sound like kind of like modern technology, which I kind of find fascinating. The song's also called Off Kilter because we liked the idea that the album's called Kilter. This is Off Kilter. So it's Off Kilter, Off Kilter. Like, there was a point where Grounded even was called Head Over Heels. And then we joked that, well, we can't do Head Over Heels because Tears for Fears have a song called Head Over Heels. So we could just call the song Head Over Heels by Tears for Fears by Tin Meats because Tears for Fears don't have a song called Head Over Heels by Tears for Fears. So the song Grounded would have been called Head Over Heels by Tears for Fears by Tin Meats. But anyway, so that's sort of the joke of Off Kilter, off the album Kilter. So then you can say Off Kilter, Off Kilter. The final track on Kilter is Walls, which again, one I mostly wrote on my own at home. We wrote that entire end section together, which, to be honest, is probably the best bit of the song. But it was based on an odd scale, which I can't quite remember now. It was like a Mixolydian thing with added flats or something. Anyway, I saw someone on social media somewhere playing around with that mode and going like, oh, is this too complicated for you? So I kind of took that as a challenge and thought, I'll write a song in that mode. Lyrically, it's probably the most direct song on the album. I moved into a new house and it had all been painted magnolia, which is the worst off-white. So I tried to paint over it with like a clean white, but all that paint bubbled and peeled off. So I scraped it all off, and underneath that magnolia was another shade of white. So I had to scrape off all the white I'd painted on top of the white to reveal another white, which I then scraped off to start the whole process again. It was no fun at all, and I felt like it was like a Sisyphean task, just painting and scraping it all off again. Legend has it, I'm still not done with the job.
It's sort of funny. I always imagine this song in two separate ways. There's kind of like the almost slapstick, like comedy style that you can imagine the lyrics in. Oh my God, the man has just peeled off another shade of white. What else is going to appear? But then the music is so serious, it just shrouds it in sadness.
Yes. Which again, I think is a good way of like explaining us generally. It's like, it's always a little bit tongue-in-cheek. As serious as we're getting, like, even more weight is a silly idea.
Yes.
Like, even if, like, the actual, like, physical reality of it isn't silly at all.
No, there's always room for humour. And just because there's humour in something doesn't mean it isn't also deadly serious.
We are Tin Meats, and thank you for listening to us do a breakdown of our new album, Kilter. Vinyl and CD orders are available on our Bandcamp, and you can get copies in America from IHeartNoise. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Thanks for listening. Bye! Bye.